hold on.
Is it recording?
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everybody. Maxwell and I are here. I'm very tired and very fed up. But I just wanted to, we've had a...
No, you're not fed up.
I am fed up.
No,
We've had this lockdown and this quarantine is getting to me.
Yes, and what do I tend to do?
Oh, Maxwell is, what are you tending to do, Maxwell?
I'm obsessive.
He's obsessing over what?
A new computer.
Okay, what happened to your other computer? Maxwell had a really nice computer that you built how long ago?
What, 3 years ago?
3 years ago. Maxwell built his own computer. He built Mummy's and he built Daddy's computer. Very clever. Speak up.
My mom took my old case at the beginning. What started it all? Maybe we could show that. Maybe at the end.
Yeah. Well, it's a really. Oh, pardon me. Excuse me. It's a really fabulous. We're both so tired, and I thought I want to show you this, but I'm tired. But I thought, oh well, you see me warts and all. Maxwell is obsessing over his new computer, but it's sort of a need.
A need, but the stuff.
Is it a need or is it a want?
A little bit of both.
Yeah, a little bit of both. Just like a lot.
Yeah,
of things.
because whenever I speak about RGB, you probably don't even know.
I have no idea what he's talking about.
Any computer geeks out there, you should know what RGB lighting is.
Yeah, well, they're quilters. They're not computer people. Anyway, the last 24 hours, 48 hours, 3 days. What happened to your old computer? Maxwell?
My computer was in Jersey.
No, before that. Why did it go to Jersey, Maxwell?
I'm gonna, because
Spit it out.
I was rushing the build.
Yeah.
I was doing a deep clean of my computer and my mom's computer. And I tried to get it in one day, and that made it my downfall. A little tiny screw got between the motherboard and the case, and it fried.
A screw this big. Ruined his computer.
Fried almost every single component except 2 parts.
So there goes his computer kaput. So Maxwell has been on about getting a computer. He's been earning money so he can afford.
I spoke to Dom and I'm going to pay the rent at the end.
Okay.
And
he's going to pay rent.
Yes.
Here we're paying rent here. Maxwell's very, very responsible. So that's been our week. Maxwell's obsessing. And I'm tired. And I'm going to get to my quilt. You must excuse me. The other day, Maxwell and I went to I won't name the store, but we went to a store. I don't get out a lot. I've been in the house now for 4 months, and it's getting to me. I'm trying to be a positive person, and
excuse me.
I'm being negative now. I'm very, very sorry because
positive thoughts and
positive thoughts. But it's getting to me. So we went to the store, which in general is I quite like this store that we go to. Grocery shopping, sort of a department store. I won't name the name. It's quite pleasant, the one. And I've never really had a terrible experience. I'm telling you, we went to this store.
And it was madness.
It was madness. Tell us.
I tried looking for a shirt, a wolf shirt, and almost every single piece of clothing was gone. It's funny. All the other pieces of clothing were gone except Phillies, Sixers, and Eagles.
Yeah, the sport team shirts were there, but the other clothing, their stock was very low.
Right now, there's really no need to support any.
there's no
team, so all the sports stuff is being left.
There was no football, there was no basketball, there was no baseball. So all of everything was left. The sign of our times, right? And it was crazy. And I've not been out in the world, in that world. My husband and even Maxwell goes out. I'm here, stay safe, and I'm telling you, I'm not exaggerating. It was almost scary. It was almost scary.
Yes.
At one point, there was you have to wait 6 foot in line. So with our basket, we literally were back in the store, in the bowels of the store, waiting in line, which was okay. Oh, right, that's fine. But at one point, we were coming up to the register. You had gone to the men's room. At one point, there was an older woman who was sort of almost, I thought, inching her way into the line where we had all been waiting. Of course, there was only 2 registers open.
So she tried to button line.
Well, I thought she was going to try to button line.
But no, she just wanted to
She just
pass.
wanted to, exactly, she wanted to pass. But I'm telling you, it wasn't in my line. And we're the type of people who, like, if I have a whole cart and somebody has a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk, I always say, go ahead. But this woman just had only a few things, but it was in the next line over, and I thought, I was watching, I could feel the tension. And I thought, oh, the people who, it looked like she was going to want to butt in line or say, can I go? I thought, they're going to knife her. That's how serious it was. The tension, everyone with their masks, everyone on edge. It's really bad here. I don't know where you folks are viewing, but we're in the Philadelphia area. And with the riots and the violence and the social unrest and the moral decline, it's just so terrible.
Keyboard and mouse.
Stop it. I'm talking serious here, and you're obsessing about your stupid computer. No, it's not a stupid computer. It's not a stupid computer. I apologize. It's important. But anyway, I'm here. I'm like laying my heart on the line, and you're talking about your computer. Anyway, let's talk about this quilt. I just got this. I just wanted to show. I just got this back from David. Stop yawning. That's rude. I got this back
Well, I'm sorry. I haven't had my coffee.
Okay.
I need my coffee.
I got this back from David Hurd, Quilting by David, my long arm quilter, who I've only sent a few things to, but right now I am sending my quilts out to him. This is the quilt I made the last few videos. I wanted to just show you the back. I wanted to show you what I did on the back of this quilt. I didn't have enough material, or I didn't have enough material from my stash that I liked for the back. And if you would remember, I had gotten this fabric here as I had gotten a couple yards extra, so I had the border. Because I had bought the fabric pack, a year or so ago, year and a half ago, at the quilt show with Jen. So I had this, and then if you remember, there was 2 green fat quarters. I used them in the quilt, and then I just pulled some pink and some green because the fabric.
So it's kind of all over.
Yeah, it's all over the place, but what is this called?
I don't even know.
This is called like patchwork. This is just a patchwork. So I just got my big, huge ruler. I cut out, I believe, either 15 or 18-inch squares, and it only took me about 40 minutes to just piece the back of my quilt. And so that's the back of my quilt. As you can see, it's not bound yet. When you get your quilt back from the long armors, it's not bound. They put a basting stitch down the side. But then you have to bind it. So what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to show you, and if you've watched me before, you've seen me do this dozens of times, I'm going to bind my quilt. And what I've chosen is, I've chosen this more of it's a white with pale pink flowers. Maybe the obvious would have been black or pink, but I've chosen to do, I don't usually use white. It's not necessarily white, it's sort of a pale pink. Come in. So... Focus. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be doing. Stop. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Oh, I used when you go to Quilting by David, if you choose to send yours out to a long arm, I used a bamboo. It's a bamboo. I've never had a bamboo batting, 6-ounce bamboo batting, and it's really quite. It has a different feel, but it's quite substantial, and it's quite, I would imagine, very warm. So I'm very pleased with it. I've done cotton, I've done the wool, and I've tried the bamboo.
Ooh, shiny.
So anyway, I'm so tired, and I'm getting fed up. And you're obsessing about your computer.
Are you getting more fed up around the what's happening, or more fed up about computer parts?
No, about what's happening.
Hey.
And excuse me, I was looking at my my personal Instagram and my personal Facebook page, and I was reminiscing. Of last year, 6 months ago, of how we really had a life. We were doing things. We were going to get-togethers with our family, with our friends, and it's come to as it has for all of you, a grinding halt. And we're living this life in this suspended, odd, not seeing people. Oh, we saw people.
Yeah.
We did have a friend come the other day, and I got so excited. Maxwell's like, I got to put on pants.
Hey, too much information.
Too much information. And I'm like, people. And we had a friend who brought us some cornbread, and we sat out on the deck. It was just 6 foot apart, of course. And now we have to wear masks everywhere we go. And I just find it stifling. And anyway, so that's what I'm doing today. I have a few other couple projects on the go that I've been doing.
Yes, and I'm going to play video games today.
He's going to play video games. Right. And just, you're going to be going over to our old house later and cutting the grass.
No, I'm not.
We got... Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
You have to cut the grass. We still have to maintain that property, but it's being sold.
I am going over there just later on because how long has it been since I've been to the house?
It's been about 10 days now. To cut the grass.
I haven't been it's been like 2-3 weeks now.
2 or 3, well, no,
I think
about 2 weeks.
3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks we have to go over and cut the grass of our old house. We have gotten an offer, and hopefully by July, here you go, thank you, by July 31st, our house will be sold. If everything goes through, we put on, Maxwell, okay, whatever. We had to put on new garage doors, which was in the agreement, which was fine. So here we are.
Hey, I guess I deserved that. I whacked my
You did. You deserved it. You were being cheeky. Anyway, so I'm going to put the binding on. That's what this tutorial. It's not a tutorial. You've seen me do binding. But Maxwell and I said
it's not a tutorial, but I'm going to still do a tutorial on how to do binding.
Well, I don't have anything else to show these lovely people, so I'm just going to finish my quilt. So I'm going to do some binding. So if you haven't watched me do binding, you'll see me do binding. So anyway, stay safe, people. Stay healthy, keep healthy, and one of these days, stop. One of these days, we'll be back to normal. He'll have his computer. I won't be fed up. And all will be well.
Hey, what other parts do we still have to order?
We have to order a few other parts.
Like what are those parts?
All right.
Well, I have to order a motherboard.
Yeah,
I have to order a keyboard and mouse.
Yeah, all right. Say goodbye, everybody. Say goodbye.
And a fan.
And a fan. Say goodbye.
Bye.
So I got back my quilt that's been quilting by David Hurd in St. Joseph, Missouri, long arm quilter. And as you know, I like to quilt most of my quilts, but lately, especially in this lockdown, I don't feel like it. And so I asked David to quilt my most recent quilt that I've made. Now, as you can see, it's a very angular pattern. You saw me making it. But I chose this beautiful design. This gorgeous, lovely, like a diamond, but a very soft, almost florally diamond pattern across the whole quilt. So the quilting in no way detracts from my piecing. I think it enhances it. It's a very subtle but soft quilting. Now, when you send your quilts to David, you provide the backing fabric and your top, your quilt top. You do not provide the batting. He has a selection. I chose a 6 ounce of bamboo batting. I've never had bamboo, but boy, it's a lovely weight. I keep saying I think batting's getting thinner and thinner. This is just beautiful. I've never had bamboo before, and I'm so pleased with the feel of it. But right now, what happens when he sends it back nice and sort of not finished, not bound, of course, but a nice stitch, so it's a nice edge. But as you know, if you've been following me, I like to round them at the corners of my quilt. So if you followed me, you know that I've done this, you've seen several binding tutorials. But if you're new, I just would like to show you how I bind the corners of my quilt, how I machine bind a quilt, and how I curve the corners of my quilt, of this beautifully quilted quilt that I just got back. And I'll finish up. So here is my quilt that I'm going to be binding, and again, this is my my quilt binding that I'm using. I cut my quilt binding at 2 1/4 inches, and then I attach it on the bias, meaning I put one this way and one this way, and it creates the diagonal seam, so you don't have all of that bulk in the seam. And then I iron it in half. I go and press my binding in half from my 2 1/4. Now here's the edge of my quilt, and what I have here is, as you can see, I will line up my two of my corners, whatever corners they are. These are my 2 corners of my quilt top. And since this is nice and fairly square, and I've made it pretty good, I can be assured that these are nice and square right here, my two corners right there. So now what I do is, again, if you've watched me, you know that I just eyeball a curve around here. But by all means, you can use a plate or a glass or some kind of circular lid or something to create and mark a nice curve. I do mine because I've been doing it a long time. I start about 3 inches from one side, and making sure they're both exactly in line. I go to about the halfway stage, and then as you see, I pull back that line, and there is my circle, my corner, 2 of my corners. Now what I do is I'm going to take my other 2 corners, which are already together, and I'm going to hold like the template, as it were, of the curve that I just did, and I'm just going to use that as like a template right there. And there's my next 2 corners, and they've been cut exactly the same way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over, there's my nice curved corners, and as I said, this comes off from the long arm quilter with a basting stitch. But usually I can just catch that basting stitch. Obviously it's not here, I just cut it off. But usually I can catch that basting stitch when I bind my quilt. But what I do is I'm going to go over to my machine, and I work from the back. I attach my quilt binding to the back of my quilt, and then I'm going to turn it to the front of my quilt. So I've taken my quilt and I've put it to the back. I'm stitching on the wrong side, and from the corner I'm going down about 18-20 inches or so, and I have my binding here, and with the folded edge on the inside and the raw edge, let me put this light on, the raw edge matching the raw edge of the quilt, I'm going to leave about a 7 inch or so. Let me see, get the lighting proper here. I'm going to leave about a 7 inch tail or so, and then I'm just going to start, and with a quarter of an inch, I'm going to sew my binding onto the back. Now it's very important that I'm just laying my binding onto my quilt. I'm not pulling it. I'm not that's the most important thing, I find. Just lay your binding loosely onto your quilt back. And then just, as I say, just lay it on. And then sew all the way around. But when I come to the corners, I'll show you what I do. Now this is a straight grain. This is the width of the fabric. It's not a bias binding. It's not a bias binding that I'm doing. I'm just using a straight grain. It's not the length. It's the width of the fabric that I've cut 2 1/4 inches. Now, as you can see, I'm coming to the curve of my quilt. Let me just put this around like this. Coming to this curve, right? Now, it's very, very, very important that at this point, you really, really do have it loose. Almost, as you can see, almost going back on itself. Because if you pull it tight, then your quilt is going to cup. It's going to just cup right under. Your quilt corners will never, ever lay flat. Now, and again, because this is not cut on the bias, which is a stretch, but I have never had a problem with my quilt corners cupping or bowing. Now, as you can see, just stitch by stitch, I'm keeping it. It's very, very important that you're almost, to a certain extent, you're almost pushing the fabric fibers back underneath the presser foot. Just bite by bite by bite. I'm just holding it. Now, this is my curve. Now, again, it's very important that you keep your 1/4 inch right around your curve. It's very, the inclination is to sort of go wider or even to go over here. But it's very important at this point that you keep your 1/4 inch. And again, just do it slowly, ever so slowly. And if you do get a tuck or two, that's okay, because that will be taken up when we turn it around to the inside. As you can see, I'm just taking bite by bite, keeping it very, trying to keep my hands out of the way. Keep just turning it as need be, pushing that under on that curve, keeping your 1/4 inch. You have to bring your presser foot up to adjust it minutely, that's fine. Pushing it underneath, pushing it back, as it were. And again, what do I always say? You're going to get sick of hearing me say it. I am sitting directly. The needle is right in front of my body. And again, I'm coming to the straightaway, but I'm still relaxing my binding. Just relax it. Now I'm on the straightaway, and I can just whiz along. Everything is straight. I'm matching my edges, and I'm not pulling anything. I'm just laying my binding. I'm just laying it down, not pulling it at all. And as you can see, there's a basting stitch there from my long arm, from David, and that will either show or not. If it shows, I just pull that stitch and it will come out. But if it's enclosed in the binding, then that's all the better. As you can see, I'm making sure that nothing is dragging or pulling on my needle. My fabric, my quilt sandwich is nice and loose. My binding is nice and loose. That makes sure nothing is being pulled or dragged. Now I'm coming up to my next corner, and I'll do the exact same thing. I'm eyeballing it about 6 inches up from the corner, as it were. I just start really relaxing it. Really relaxing it. Keeping in mind my 1/4 inch the whole time. No, I have a seam there. Isn't that always the way? Didn't really want a seam, but that's okay. Just keeping in mind my 1/4 inch. It's funny having that seam there. That's a pain. It's not really. But and as you can see, and you might be thinking, oh, it's all puckered, but that's awesome for when we go to turn our binding, and it just, all of those puckers smooth right into the curve, as you will see. Now I'm on my straightaway. Pull out my binding again. And when I say to hold your binding, or if you wanted to pin it, I don't find it necessary. I just sort of am working about 6 or 8 inches in front of me at all times. And at that point, I'm just holding my binding onto the fabric where I want. So it doesn't have the opportunity to stretch or to pull. It's where I'm putting it. My hands are almost working as pins would. So that's why I'm just doing it. I'm just laying it. I'm laying it and then holding it. Laying it and holding it.
Yay, another binding tutorial.
Maxwell, be quiet. Maxwell comes in, another binding tutorial. All right, all right. They don't mind. They like to see me bind a quilt. There's so many ways to bind a quilt. I mean, a lot of people...
I guess it's
what?
ASMR binding a quilt.
What did you say?
ASMR.
What's ASMR? What's ASMR? What does that mean, Maxwell? ASMR. You're looking up on your phone.
I know the meaning, but it's like
ASMR.
Feeling of well being combined with tingling and sensation in the scalp, or
what is it? A feeling of. Say it loud. A feeling. What is it?
No. Autonomous sensory meridian response.
Where did you find that? Atomic sensory meridian response. What the heck, Maxwell? I don't. Oh, so when a person who perhaps has challenges does something repetitive, or they clap, or they do that, I see. So that's what. So tapping or something.
Yes.
So is that what you were learning in your classes?
Nope, Jackson.
Oh, Jackson. Oh, my grandkid told you that. Oh, here I'm thinking, oh, you're real clever. Well, what does binding have to do with ASMR? Something repetitive. Well, I guess because it's repetitive.
Bind the sound of the sewing machine. If you did that constantly, combined with other sounds, ASMR.
Okay. Well, you get that, folks? I am doing ASMR. Wow. And our 10-year-old grandson told us, Maxwell, all about it. I thought he was learning it in his class.
Jackson knows more about YouTube than you do.
Yeah, he follows me on YouTube. Oh, he's such a sweet child. That's our Jackson. He's, how old is Jackson? He'll be 11. And he's like, Nana, you have so many followers, and he's so funny. He's cute. Anyway, I'm just going to finish this up, and then I'll show you what we do at the very end. So I've just finished up my last corner up here, and I'm going to stop. As you can see, my tail where I began is out down here, and I'm going to leave probably about a 12-inch opening. So I'm going to take out my thread there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to now turn my quilt exactly to my side, just like this, right in front of me. I'm going to turn it sideways so it's right in front of me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these two things down. I have a long tail there. I have a long tail there, and I have a long tail here. Okay? So I've stopped there, and I've stopped down here. All right, and then I have this. Now we want to join this. We want to join these two ends. Now, by all means, if you wanted to, you could just cut this right there and join this with a straight stitch, okay? But I quite like doing it on the bias, how we constructed my binding, right? So what we do now is, right now I'm just going to cut off the excess. Just cut that bit off right there, okay? Because I always make it a little bit longer. And I just cut a small piece here, like about this size. Now I'm going to open this piece up, the excess. Now I know, obviously, it's been cut exactly the same width as this. Now this is where you have to be brave. Holding this down, just again, I'm going to get a pin here, not pulling anything, nothing, not pulling, not tugging, just laying the bottom one down here, where we stitched it, just laying it there and laying the top one down. I'm going to take my excess piece of fabric, pulling my top one off, and I'm just going to lay that right at the edge of my bit right there. Okay, I'm just going to lay that right on the bottom edge there, this sort of spacer piece, and I'm going to pin it. Okay, so everything's laying nice and smooth and not pulled. So I'm going to take my top piece over. Now this is, again, I always say this is where you have to be brave. And I'm now going to cut my top piece of binding right in line with this spacer piece, right in line with that, right there. I'm going to cut that bit off, okay? Now what we're going to do is you're going to take off your spacer piece here, and then just as when we made our binding, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my quilt this way, and I'm going to pull the top one, and I'm going to lay that binding the pretty side up, right like that. I have enough. And then I'm going to take my bottom bit here. I'm going to make sure it doesn't twist or anything. I'm going to put the pretty side down, just like we do how we made our initial binding. Now, by all means, again, if you want to pin this, you can. I'm going to match up the top, sort of, because it's stitched, you have to sort of pull it up, but I'm going to match up that top. I have the pretty sides together, okay? It's nice and square. I'm going to go to that one diagonal corner, and I'm going to carefully stitch right down diagonally to this corner. Right down to the corner. Now, so I've made a bias seam there, okay? There's my bias seam. And you can see where my fold marks are meeting. Now, before we start trimming anything, what I want you to do is I want you to pull your binding to as it is, and there you see our binding, which is completely finished, is going to lay perfectly straight, perfectly flat. And now I can finish up binding. But first of all, now that I know that it fits, I'm going to take this excess little triangle here. I'm going to make sure I don't cut underneath. I'm going to hold that like that and cut about 1/4 inch away from that stitching. And then finger press that. Just finger press that seam open so we don't have a lot of bulk. Like that. And then it wants to go on the creased fold anyway. The iron fold. I'm going to go back to where I stopped. Laying it down just as before. Back stitch, and then I'm just it's just laying smooth. There's our seam where we began and where we ended, and there's 1 or 2 tucks, but that's okay. There, I'm going to go right back into the seam there, and there, put this up. There is my binding. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is there's my binding, all nice and straight. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, well, it doesn't matter, I'm going to turn my quilt around to the front. Okay, I'm going to turn my quilt around. Again, I'm keeping everything straight, perfectly straight in front of me. Perfectly straight, and it's right to the side of me. This is a nice size quilt. I don't need it. Sometimes I will have a table right next to my chair, as well as my table over here. Over here, I would have one behind me and next to my chair. But this quilt is fine. I I can have most of it on the table to my left. Now, again, I'm going to start about 12 inches down or so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my binding. Now, I'm not pulling it. I'm not pulling it towards me. I'm pulling it out. I'm just tugging it out. As you can see, I'm not trimming any. I've trimmed everything off. Or from the long arm, they've trimmed it off, my batting and everything. There's a lot of ways to attach a binding. This is how I do it. Now, I'm just pulling it out. And that is about a good 1/4 of an inch away. So when I do my binding, as you can see, I'm going to start right there. And this is where you're saying, oh, it's on the outside. You have to do really good stitching. Well, yeah, you do. With practice, you can get really nice stitching. I'm just pulling this out gently, tugging it, and then rolling it. And it actually does enclose all that basting stitch. And then I will just finish quilting, and I'll show you in a minute. I'm just tugging it out and rolling it over and stitching close to the inside edge there. Tugging it, flattening it, and rolling it. And why I particularly like my 1/4 inch binding, or 2 1/4 inch binding, is because it really does fill the binding in your quilt. Really does, the edge of the binding really does fill. Your quilt goes right to the top, to the edge of the binding. So I'm going to continue, and then when I get to the curve, I'll show you what we do then. So I'm just going to continue, just smoothing and rolling and enclosing my raw edges here. Again, keeping it straight in front of me. And I've always said I don't, if you know, you've followed me, I don't like to hand sew anything. So I personally feel that my machine bound edges will last a tremendous amount longer than any hand stitching I can do. So many like the traditional method of sewing it to the back, sewing it to the front and turning it to the back. By all means, if that's how you want to do it, that's absolutely fine. Now here's a basting stitch that sort of goes into there. I won't be enclosing that, but when I finish up, I will come along and I'll just pull these basting stitches out. Like that one, I can just pull out. But I will trim it all up when I'm finished binding. So I'm going to come down this edge. For the most part, my binding, that basting stitch is hidden. And I'll leave it in there, it's fine, because it's holding my edges together. If I was sewing this myself, I would absolutely do exactly what's been done. I do a complete edge stitching down the edge of my quilt, holding all 3 edges together. Again, here's some basting stitches, but that's okay. They'll just pull right out. So now I'm coming down to the corner of my quilt, and as you can see where I eased it, I eased that around. I'm just going to turn that like this, sort of finger press it in, finger press it like that. Now the quilt, it's very important to keep the quilt this way, perfectly square on my table. It's right in front of me. It's not off to the side. I'm not off to the side. So you can turn this, roll this over real nice. So this edge here, this bottom edge of my quilt, is just nice and level with my table. So now, as you can see, without even messing about even right until I get to it, as I just have sort of tugged that out, that quilt binding is sort of laying up nicely, but standing up nicely. But then when I just push it over, just go slowly, I push that over, because I've eased it, and I've kept that 1/4 inch. Again, do it slowly. I've kept that 1/4 inch. You want to keep it that your tendency maybe is to do like that. Well, don't do that. Keep your 1/4 inch, because that's how it's been sewn. So the quilt is actually filling the corner the quilt itself is filling this corner binding right to the edge. Now you might want to lift your presser foot and just do it stitch by stitch until you get again to the straightaway. Stitch by stitch. Again, you're not pulling anything. That's the trick. You're just pulling this out and laying, rolling and laying. Now I'm on my straightaway. Again, it's right in front of me. It's nice and loose, both on the side of my table to my left and on my lap. Now again, people say, well, you're stitching on you're stitching on the front. That's all very well and good. Whatever does it look like on the back? Well, there's the back of my quilt binding, and absolutely, you can see, now there's some basting stitches, I'll pull out, but there you absolutely can see a little bit of the machine stitching. Obviously you can. Now there's my corner, and as you can see, look how beautifully that lays. It's not cupped, it's lovely and flat. There's no puckers, and you can see, hopefully you can see the stitching, absolutely, because that's the stitching on this side. You can see it, but that doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I quite like it. It almost gives it a more professional, a professional stitched appearance. So I'm quite okay with that. And as you can see, my binding has been stitched down really, really nice. So I'm just going to finish up doing the next 3 corners. So I have finished binding my quilt, and what I do, a lot of people have asked me if I'd put labels on my quilts. I actually have had these labels printed up, and all this is because I have a business, my Truelove Quilts for You shop on Etsy. All I have done with my label is I have it printed, Truelove Quilts for You, Jeannie Truelove at AOL, a special quilt for you. So if anybody in the future wants to get in touch with me, they can get in touch with me. Now what I do is on the bottom of my quilt, either the left or right, I'm not really bothered. These labels can be stitched on by hand or by machine. So what I do is on each side, on each end here, this is how they're printed, they're woven. I will sort of just turn these edges in. I'll just turn these edges in. I'll start at one end, I'll turn that in, and then I just line up just away from about 4 inches from my curved corner. I just line that up right. Even though I'm going to be machine stitching it, most of my quilts are very busy, so you won't even see the stitching. I'm not bothered at all. And I almost sort of like to go over the stitching on my binding, if I can. If it's inside, that's fine. So I'm just going to put it right at the corner there, keeping everything right nice and straight. Again, not tugging anything, not pulling anything. I'm just going to turn that edge over, and then very carefully, whoops, yeah, sometimes that happens. I wanted to, oops, no. Nope, I should edit that out, but I won't because that happens. So what I do is maybe I'll start just a few stitches in. That's better. And then I'll back stitch to the end. That's it. And I'm just stitching just right below the words, catching my label. Just stitching real slow, just bite. Now I'm going to turn that end in. I am hunched over my machine here. I'm going to come right to the end, right there, and I'm going to turn it like that. I'm just going to tuck that little fold in, and I think I can go one more stitch. I want it as neat as possible. Yeah, I can go one more stitch. I'm going to turn it towards me. And I'm just going to tuck that little end in like that. I'm just going to go right like that to the end there. Hopefully you can see this. And then what I'm going to do, needle down always, needle down, needle down. I'm going to just bring it towards me, smoothing it right like that. Like that. Smoothing it. Everything's nice and straight. Press a foot down. And then I'm going to just go on the top of this top stitching, that top words there. Just catching it. I could obviously hand stitch this on, but I'm not bothered, and it's all nice and tightly. Now I'll get rid of this first thing, and then I'll put my put my pressing foot down, and then right to there, and then I'll go push that button, and I just do a few stitches back, and there's my label on. And you could never, in the busyness of my quilt, you could never ever tell that there's a label on there. There's the stitching right there, but you could never tell. So there's my label. And my quilt is done. Now what am I going to do? Again, if you've been following, you know that I press my quilts. I'm going to go over, and it's been handled. I'm going to press this. I'm going to see if there's any of that basting stitch. I'll pull that out. I'll just pull out these few bits of basting stitch that the long arm quilter put in, and then tidy up my edges there. Press this, iron all that really nice, iron my binding down, iron my corners down. And yeah, because when I iron my quilts, because I figure I've messed with them, that's what I do. I don't know if a lot of people do, but they've been messed about a lot, and the batting, any batting you have will pop up anyway. So yeah, so my quilt is all done. I like that binding. I like that binding very much. So I'll take some still photos. But again, thank you very, very much, folks, for following me with the making of my black and white, very, very easy half square triangle 5 diamonds quilt. And again, shout out to David Hurd at Quilting by David. He did a grand job. Love it. All right, folks. See ya. Bye.